Roberto.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations with
I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
I'll give him a break.
All right, they say we're live, so we're live. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Backfire.
That's an exciting edition of Backfire.
Always an exciting edition of Backfire. What's going on this week, guys? John Stanberry, Franklin Chansey, Steve Doball Hickson. What's going on in the world this week?
Well, I did hear an interesting local development. Apparently, our new insurance that the county employees have, our own ambulance service is out of network. So,
how could that happen?
Do we have any other ambulance services
well,
here?
I think, now, somebody can correct me on this, because there's been some discussion about who the hospital was using and some things like that. I think the county commission actually made us a county that doesn't allow outside ambulance services to do certain things. It all has to be the county ambulance service. But the county ambulance service is now outside of network of our own insurance. So from what I understand, anytime a county employee has had to use the ambulance, they've just been sort of comping it, writing it off.
Tell us what you think. 614-5553.
So in other words, it doesn't cover their riding in the ambulance, right?
The health insurance for the county employees, apparently our own ambulance service is out of network.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. You think we'd have looked at that a little closer? Who's going to fix that little problem?
I don't know. That would, that's a department under the mayor's control.
Speaking of mayor, there's an election coming up in, August?
August, whatever the first Tuesday, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, what else going to be in that election? You got the mayor's race. What else?
You have city election. You've got the state primaries, and that's it.
Why would we have an election so close to the election we just had?
Well, you have to break these things up. You had a county. What happens is these things overlay each other. The city decided to have their primary in August. The county has a primary in May, and then the general. So it's the county general, the city general, and the state.
Because the city doesn't have primaries.
Right. The city theoretically is nonpartisan, so they don't have to have a primary. They just have a general election.
And they just do it at the same time as the other state primaries going on.
Okay. Now, they could have chosen, the idea is you don't want to have to run a city general by itself because it costs money to run these things. So they could have chosen to have it in May when the county had their primary, but they choose to have it in August.
And spend more money.
No, it doesn't. I mean, we were having an election anyway. It's another page on the ballot. So that's not that's not the city. Either one of those times is the same amount of money.
All right. Hey, I want to ask you a question, John. I've read an article briefly the other day, and I can't even remember much about it. It's been a while, but it was about nursing homes and people leaving family members, just going off and leaving them.
Dropping them off there, you mean?
Yeah, dropping them off.
You mean not enrolling, not
Yes.
going, just putting them out?
It's apparently an issue in some communities.
Well, I hope that's not ever an issue in Cleveland, Bradley County.
I know you're on the board up here. What do you do when there's no family involved?
Well, I mean, there's Medicaid and Medicare both cover those things. To be honest, sometimes if there's no family involved, you're in a little better situation, actually, because everybody understands that there's no ability to pay there, and so the government, Franklin likes to say we are a socialist government. We do have aspects that we agreed as a fabric of our society to take care of people that aren't able to. And so when you go to the nursing home, they'll talk to you about what your income is, what your assets are, what Social Security will do, what Medicaid and Medicare will do.
You know, a lot of people.
But let me say something, though. What you're talking about is completely separate from the concept of a family simply driving up and putting grandmom or granddad out,
Right.
because there are things available. You know, it's like the abortion issue when we talk about that. It's like a mom going into the bathroom and delivering a baby and leaving it in the garbage. We have laws in Tennessee that allow you to drop that baby off at a hospital and it will be taken care of. So the idea that you would throw it in the garbage, the idea that you would put grandma or granddad out when there is actual help out there for you is just shameful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of, parents are living so long now. We have a problem, I think, because people are living so long, and the fact that, it's their children are pretty old having to take care of the other ones. So,
Well, half of them are having to raise their grandchildren, unfortunately, as well.
Right.
Well, I mean, we've talked about that. Republicans for years have floated proposals to extend the retirement age. Unfortunately, the Democrats see it more as a wedge issue they can beat us up over and run ads of us killing Granny and pushing her off a cliff. But the fact of the matter is Social Security and those things were all based on a certain lifespan, and that lifespan, because of advances in health, advances in medicine, has increased. And the fact that we haven't gone back and looked at Social Security and some of these things and said, well, people aren't dying at 67 anymore, they're dying at 77. So 62 may not be a feasible retirement age anymore. It may need to be 64. There are ways to actually fix Social Security that only involve maybe bumping the retirement age up 2 years. But we can't get a conversation on it because it's too easy for the Democrats to vilify Republicans and use it as a campaign issue.
Well, it's the same way with DACA, isn't it?
Well, the president offered a bigger fix to DACA than Obama ever envisioned. Matter of fact, he offered more than the Democrats said they wanted, and they wouldn't even allow it to come up for a discussion or a vote because it was too valuable as a campaign issue.
The only problem with that discussion is it was the White House who pulled out of the deal, not the Democrats.
The Democrats wouldn't allow it to be discussed. Frankly, he offered actual citizenship for 1.8 million DACA people. That is more than you all ever dreamed of. All you had to do was go, yes, we'll take it.
John, they offered him his money for his wall.
Didn't offer it.
Yeah, they did.
They offered nothing.
Yes,
they offered 25 miles on the wall or something. They didn't offer any serious proposal to build the wall.
That's revisionist history.
And that's on top of the fact that your people actually voted to fund the wall about 10 years ago and never came through with the funding. Chuck Schumer voted and spoke in favor of the wall and then wouldn't give the money.
Offered the president a virtual blank check for his wall if he would pass it, and he pulled out the next day after the Republican critics got on his rear end. That's what happened, and you know it's true.
Franklin, your people like these things as issues, plain and simple.
You guys
and you're scared to death of losing some of your
and now you're blaming Democrats for that.
Constituencies.
Oh, listen,
agree with
hey, we can start yelling, screaming early. I mean, let's not get in that yet. Let's talk about Starbucks, Howard Schultz, the big difference between his qualifications and Trump's, should he decide to run for president.
He hasn't filed for bankruptcy 3 times? That might be one.
Hold on, we got a call. Let's take the call real quick. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I give you a break there for a minute or a second or whatever you let me. I'm Edward Webb. I worked at Bradley Memorial for 43 years, and we also used to be in charge of the nursing home, the hospital did, and I was in charge of purchasing, got supplies for that. But what I'm calling about, and thank you, Doctor, for serving on that. I remember your grandfather years ago, but what I was calling about, I hear that I read that used to there was many county nursing homes in the state of Tennessee, but now we only have one. So I hope that Bradley County doesn't sell that like we did Bradley Memorial Hospital.
Well, I will say I'm not sure exactly. I was under the impression that several years ago there were 5 county-owned nursing homes in the state, and that we're down to 4. You may be right, though. It's the environment is getting very difficult for any nursing home, much less a nonprofit, to get by. And quite frankly, I think it's because the government is designing the programs now to basically force people to stay home and in my opinion, die at home because it's cheaper for the government.
Yeah, that's right. But how can for-profit corporation, organization, or someone buy a county facility, and when the county can't afford to run it or the money's not there, that they can make it go?
Well, it all depends on what you're trying to do. In our case, the county nursing home here is a not-for-profit, so we're not trying to earn enough money for the profit, and that allows us to spend more on our staff and some things like that. Corporations, one of the big problems we have is the budgets. We don't have the money to have someone full-time staffed at Tenova and another person at Erlanger and another person at Memorial. So it puts us at a disadvantage for getting patients in. When your census is not up, you have a hard time, keeping your budget straight. So it's very difficult for a nonprofit to compete against these corporations that have huge budgets. They have huge accounting departments, huge advertising. We don't have the money to advertise. It's a tough environment. But it's tough for all nursing homes, commercial and nonprofit, because of, in my opinion, because of the burden that the government is putting on us now.
Yeah, and when a corporation buys it, has several facilities, they can centralize some
Right.
of their organization. I appreciate you taking my time, and I appreciate what you're doing on the nursing home board. And Dan Gilbert and I worked together for years, and I'll get off of here. Thanks again. Bless you. Enjoyed listening to you, and maybe I got this cooled down a little while we talk.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
And let me say I do appreciate that. Granddad, as I understand it, in 1957, the Medical Society actually got together and helped establish the Bradley County Nursing Home. And I know that Granddad participated in that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Erlanger. It seems to be a big issue right now with the emergency room. The hospital, Tenova versus Erlanger. Tenova says they're going to build one, and Erlanger's ready to build one. So what's the issues here?
It's called a certificate of need from the state of Tennessee, and I'll be honest with you, we've had programs at Rotary Club by both of them. Erlanger came first, and Tenova came second, and I asked the same question of both of them. I said, in a capitalist society, if you want to go out and spend the money to build a building, build a business, and offer services to the public, why in the world should we have to have a certificate of need? And every time I've asked that, you get this, well, we don't want to see money being wasted. Really? You don't want to see money being wasted?
Well, you've got doctors up here saying now that basically they don't want it because, well, I guess it wouldn't be enough work.
Understand that now we're talking about you're going to get one. The question is who's going to do it.
But see, here's the thing. There's a lot of things on both sides of this issue. Some of the doctors are concerned and should be concerned that an Erlanger would come in and you go to Erlanger and you have a broken arm and they don't refer you to an orthopede that works in Cleveland. They refer you to an orthopede down in Chattanooga. So there are very legitimate concerns about that.
And understand, lots and lots of the physicians here now are effectively employees of the hospital.
Well,
so that's not exactly, the whole arrangement is a little bit incestuous these days. And I'm not criticizing them for that. That's the way medicine has developed, but that's the facts.
Well, actually, I would argue it's not the way medicine is developed. It's the way the government and the insurance industry have shaped it.
So what, right now there's a competition in Cleveland with Chattanooga Heart Institute. Mm-hmm. There's Tenova's trying to.
Well, and Erlanger is trying to compete with Memorial on heart business also.
Sure. And in Cleveland, in Cleveland, you can't. I mean, that they have signs now. Chattanooga Heart. If you have a problem,
Well, now look, like Chattanooga Heart Institute, though, like here, they're local doctors. They're doctors that they work for Chattanooga Heart Institute, but they live and their kids go to school in Cleveland. They're Cleveland people.
I agree. But what's the issue with Tenova? Some of them, I mean,
look, here's my problem. I'm torn several ways here on this because as a sole proprietor, it's very difficult to deal with a big corporation coming in. They hire people that do the same thing you do, and then you're supposed to compete with them. And so I have my sympathies there, but as someone who supports free enterprise, the idea that you have to get permission from the government. For example, we had a group that wanted to put an MRI in, and they had to go to Nashville and get a certificate of need. Well, quite frankly, the local hospital was capable of shutting that down, and that's another thing. It gets into wheeling and dealing.
First
and
of all,
politics.
the local hospital is owned by a corporation in Nashville.
Right. That's true, too, now.
There's no local ownership at all.
Right.
But my point is they shut that down, so the people in Cleveland were left with one MRI. Now, I bring this up all the time. John Stossel talks about it. You should look at LASIK surgery as what medicine could be. LASIK surgery has never been covered by any insurance program. It's always been a out-of-pocket pay. So go back 5 years, 10 years ago, LASIK surgery was $5,000 an eye.
Right.
You can get it for under $250 now. So a service, a medical provided service that's never been covered by insurance, never been dictated and meddled with by insurance companies and by things like that, the government has actually gone from $5,000 down to $250. That's what the private enterprise and competition can do. We don't have competition in healthcare. Now, you used to among doctors.
The only competition we have in healthcare is the hospital associations trying to set the laws.
Well, see, I just personally, I don't like the whole concept of a certificate of need. We have banks come in here all the time and open up. Some of them make it, some of them end up closing. But ultimately, the consumer benefits from that. You can pick and choose who gives you the best service. That's what our business model in the United States of America used to be based on. It wasn't based on asking the government permission.
Well, let me just get to the bottom line here. What's going to happen on this Tenova Erlanger emergency room?
I guess we'll see who's got the best lobbying group in Nashville.
Literally, that's actually correct. It will be decided by a bunch of people in Nashville as to which one gets to do that. Pure and simple. So the public won't get to look at both buildings that get built, both doctor groups that are in there. They won't get to go in and experience the service in two different competitors and decide which one's best. A bunch of guys in Nashville will decide.
What's wrong with that? What's right with it?
Well, all the things that John is saying about that are fundamentally true.
Sure.
Okay? Now, is there another side to it? Sure there is. The other side to it is that experience has shown that in some of these instances, like MRI machines and so forth, where the government pays for so many of the services, that having too many of them just generates more of the tests being run unnecessarily because it's profitable for somebody. And so that's the question that it raises.
But
now, that doesn't mean what John says is wrong, but that's the other side of the coin.
But the problem is if you get a doctor who is unethical enough to simply run tests because he wants to generate income, what's the difference whether he has one place to do that in or 4 places to do that in? Matter of fact, if he's doing that, there's a good chance that the competition might actually weed him out.
That's right.
It's possible, but it's also possible that one of the issues will be who owns the machine and whether there's an incentive at that point.
Well, years ago, there used to be an issue when the MRIs came out. Wasn't doctors buying the MRI machine?
That was an issue.
And they were setting up separate clinics, and then they were sending the patients.
And there are, in fact, practices in this area who have their own MRI machine.
Well, let me give you an example of that, though. This comes from a local doctor, okay?
Yeah.
To fight that, the government came in and they said, okay, blood tests, for example. Doctors can do their own blood tests. You can buy a little computer machine and you put a module in to test for whatever it is you want to test for. So a local doctor has a patient come in, and he wants a specific test. Let's say it's cholesterol.
Right.
And he charges $35 for that cholesterol test. Well, under the regulations, he can't draw the blood and do the test for exactly what Franklin was saying. The government is basically accusing him on the front end and saying, well, we're afraid that you're going to do too many of these cholesterol tests. Well, hang on a minute. You're going to do too many. So we won't allow you to do that. So you know what he has to do to get that cholesterol test? He has to draw the blood, send it to an outside provider like Franklin said, but they won't do a cholesterol test. They'll only do a full screen, which costs $110. So the $35 that the government was afraid he was going to cheat them out of cost the taxpayer $110 because that's the only way he could get the cholesterol test he wanted. So I look at this and kind of go, okay, what? You're going to accuse people of being dishonest on the front end before they do anything? You're going to put these rules and regulations in place that actually cost more money than the fraud you're supposedly worried about.
For some reason, that seems to go on a lot in America, doesn't it?
And the doctor told me that. He said, I hate this. I don't need all these other things. All I need is the cholesterol test. Yeah. And I could have done it, but they won't allow me to do it. So I had to spend $110 for a bunch of tests I didn't want.
It can go on. There's a lot of doctors running a lot of tests just to cover their rear ends for lawsuits, too, isn't there?
Well, there is an awful lot of that because, for example, in an ER, they had a guy come in, and he's a regular. He's in every weekend, has a drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's got a headache. The doctor knows 99.99999 that he probably just has a headache. But he says, you know what? If he's that 1 in a million case that has a brain tumor and I miss it, I'm going to get sued. So what does he do? He orders that MRI you're talking about. That's a $1,500 test. $1,500. He gets it back and goes, he's got a headache.
It's $800 in Dalton, $750.
Well, that's competition.
How come we can't get a price tag on an MRI?
Well, I mean, look, the LASIK surgery, you all really need to look at that because that takes a laser, it takes equipment. Mm-hmm. It went from $5,000 down to $250 in a course of several years.
I could look at it, wouldn't help anything.
Because you need LASIKs.
Yeah, you get a bill, you get a prize, you get a bill. I want to go back to this Starbucks guy, Howard Schultz. The big difference between my qualification and Trump's. Of course, he's saying that he's run companies all over the world, China, and he's used to traveling. You don't think Trump was?
He runs companies all over the world.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he doesn't run companies all over the world.
He owns companies all over the world.
Actually, he doesn't own companies all over the world.
Well, well, let's see.
He's partners.
You know what, Franklin? That's where you all lose, and that's where you're going to lose future elections because instead of just letting a point like that go, you pull up the lawyerly answer because you have such hatred for this president. You can't just let it go.
No,
99% of the people in America would agree that Trump is an international businessman.
I didn't say he's not an international businessman.
Did.
No, I didn't.
You nitpicked around because you can't just say something nice about the man.
Okay, he's a fraud and a failed businessman. How about that one?
Keep
Is that clear?
You're going to lose elections just like you lost
John,
the last
he's doing plenty to help us win elections this week.
Well, I don't think so. The generic ballot has fell about 15% in the last 6 months.
He guaranteed Iowa and Wisconsin yesterday. Good job, President Trump.
We'll see.
He did what?
He gave Iowa and Wisconsin to the Democrats yesterday.
Why?
With his tariffs that Mexico responded to, targeting those states.
Well, what are they going to do? Not buy apples?
Actually, turns out Mexico is our second biggest importer of pork products.
Well, wait a minute. They're our number one importer on illegal aliens.
You mean exporter?
Exporter, then. Okay, exporter.
Okay, what's that got to do with the trade deal?
Well, because it hurts people on the other end. And people are looking at this, Frank. They're looking at the economy. They're looking at the growth in the economy.
Here's what I'm looking at, John. Here's what I'm looking at, John.
American consumer.
90% of the Republicans in America, at least the ones who are elected, are opposed to what the president did. Which side are you on?
Do you want to take a bet on whether the Iowans vote for Democrats?
Yeah, right now I would, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Just keep ranting and raving.
I just want to get to the bottom of something.
Well,
And
I can't condone gambling.
I can't get to the bottom of this
There is no bottom.
I want to know
Not for
why
the Democrats, you're right.
why you hate Donald Trump so bad.
I don't hate him.
Hate him.
I just think that he's systematically destroying American institutions of government and respect for them.
Wait a minute.
That's what I think.
You know what
Because he's cleaning
destroyed
up all
the
Obama's
weaponization
I don't know
of
what you,
government
I don't know
by
what
the
you,
Obama
I don't even know
administration
what
is
you
what
mean by
destroyed it.
cleaning it up. He's got the most corrupt EPA administrator in history.
He's got an
he's cleaning it
EPA
up.
administrator that actually thinks the EPA is out of control, and that
It
makes
is.
him corrupt according to you all.
Instead of actually submitting nominees to Congress and having them vetted for top posts in all these agencies, they're just filling them internally with lobbyists.
It's because the
It's
Democrats are
as
requiring
corrupt as
30
we've
hours
ever
of
seen.
debate on
No,
every
they're not.
nomination.
He hasn't even have a nominee, John.
Because
not
you
even
all
a
have
nominee.
shut all the ones he put up down. Why keep putting people up if your people won't allow them to have debate?
He's totally
Mitch
selling
McConnell
the government.
has ended the August recess because of the Democrats blocking on judicial nominations.
A panic move if there
No, it's not a panic move.
It's to keep Democrats from going out and campaigning.
No, it's not,
They all
Franklin.
know
It's
that,
to
John.
make them work. Make them do their job.
Fine, John.
Make
Keep it
them
up.
work.
Keep it up.
Did the Republicans do this to the Democrats?
No,
When
we
Obama was in office?
Yes,
Obama
absolutely.
confirmed record numbers, and we did not require 30 hours discussion on every one.
More judicial nominees have been confirmed for Donald Trump in 15
Only
months
because
than
you
were
all
Obama.
changed the rules.
Then were
Democrats
Obama.
are not turning in the blue slips. They're supposed to turn in a slip to allow a nomination to go forward.
More of
They're
them have
refusing.
been confirmed
Because
for
we have
Trump
forced it.
than Obama.
Because we forced
But
it
you
through the
have
rules
this
that you
myth
all
going.
changed.
No,
That it was some conspiracy against them. This is the problem. You say this crap, and then we look at the facts, and you go, "Oh, well, you're just talking
You
about
mean like the
detail."
economy growing at 4.9%?
It isn't going
That
at
fact?
4.9.
Oh, wait a minute. That's not factual?
No, it's not.
It's not factual.
In fact, Trump's own department just revised
wait a minute.
down
Are things
what
better?
the growth was.
Are things much better now than they have been in the last 8 years?
In some
10
areas.
10 years?
In some areas, yes.
Trump's doing a good job then, right?
If you say so. The same people who were in here complaining.
All
Let me just read this to you. The Atlanta Fed's GDP Now tracker sees the second quarter rising by 4.8%.
Rising by 4.8% doesn't mean it's at 4.8% overall, John. That's not what it says. You can read English, can't you?
Franklin, that's the way this is written, but what they're saying is the quarterly
Oh,
will be
wait, now I
4.8%.
can't rely on what they wrote because you know what they mean.
Well, it's the Fed, so
Come
I
on.
wouldn't rely on a lot by any government agency.
Even ones run by Republicans.
CNBC's
apparently.
rapid update, for instance, puts the April to June period at 3.6%. We're looking at close to a 4% growth rate, which will have a huge impact on our deficit and our everything we do. We are growing at record amounts. We have the lowest unemployment for 18 years, 19 years. Black unemployment is the lowest ever recorded, Franklin, ever recorded.
Everybody's reporting the
A
economy.
continuation of an 8-year trend.
We have now retaken position from Hong Kong as the most competitive economy in the world. That was just put out by a Switzerland-based think tank. You know, those internationals that hate Trump. We have lowest black unemployment. Consumer confidence spiked to a 17-year high. More than 1 million American jobs have been created just since we passed tax reform. This president has created over 3 million jobs since he took office. And we now have, now listen to this, for the first time ever recorded, the government says there are more jobs available than there are unemployed people in the economy. Never happened before, Franklin. But by all means, you and Nancy Pelosi go out in November and say the economy's bad.
By all means, John, I'll put Obama's job creation numbers up against your guys. No problem. Because simple math
got
would
over
show who was
2%
doing.
growth. In 8 years, never got over 2% growth.
Franklin, you ain't got
Only
anything to say, Franklin.
only president in history.
Are you telling me that quarterly growth wasn't over 3% during Obama?
For a year.
Has it happened under Trump yet? No. So what are you bragging about before you've done it? That's typical Republican
Actually,
crap.
growth
Oh,
averaged
it's going to be
2.9%.
sunshine and roses if we're elected, and it
Franklin.
never happens. Oh, we're going to get the deficit
Look,
under
I
control.
can't help
we
it
blew
that
it up more in 12
your
months
boy
than they ever
Obama
did.
never did something that even Jimmy Carter was able to do.
other words, everything I'm looking at says the Trump economy is doing really well.
It is.
So why,
Thank you, Obama.
Why are you saying it's bad? Thank you, Obama. What did Obama do? Tell me something Obama did to help the economy. Tell me one
He
thing.
created more jobs than Trump did.
Trump's only been, he's created almost competitive with Obama
Quarter
in
by
a year and a
quarter.
half.
Quarter by quarter, he created more jobs than Trump.
Franklin, you
What'd he
can't
do?
argue with things like lowest unemployment rate ever recorded.
John, how many jobs, what was
Folks,
the
just listen to
average
this.
jobs created
You know what's
per
happening.
month
Listen to
in the
Franklin.
last 15 months of the Obama administration?
Listen to what he's
Answer
saying.
the question, John.
I got to take a break, but I want to say something before I take a break.
One lie after another over here.
I want to say something before we take a break. I think Trump's doing a great
I know
job.
you do, Steve. And it's one of your
And so does the
cuter.
vast majority of the American people.
Actually, they don't. By poll after poll after poll.
No,
I don't even know what that means. When your approval rating's 42%, the vast majority
Keep
of
coming up
Americans don't
daily.
think
His
that.
approval rating last month was higher than Obama at this point in Obama's presidency.
Bye-bye.
Turned
We'll
out
be
to be
right back.
false.
We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Flex160.com. Cheaper than a payday loan. Flex160.com. Title loans got you bogged down? Flex160.com. A better money solution. Flex160.com. Flex160.com. Flex160.com.
Attention, Cleveland area creditors. Are you tired of dealing with debtors that owe you money? I'm Jeff Renfro, and I've owned and operated Financial Recovery, a debt recovery specialist here in my hometown of Cleveland for 18 years. We're a licensed and bonded Tennessee collection agency working for a wide variety of creditors, from commercial, manufacturing, physicians, dentists, attorneys, small business owners, to individuals. Look, any kind of business dealing with billing, charge accounts, or even return checks. I know your past due accounts are not a top priority for you, but they would be to me. Let me try to make it easy for you to make a change in the way you've been handling your accounts. There's no contract and no cost to you in most cases, as our fee of only 30% can be added to the balance owed to you. So whether you have hundreds of accounts monthly and need help with your billing and collection, or you're just an individual and somebody owes you money, let me help you. Give me a call at 400-5376 and I'll come by and see you. That's 400-5376.
Financial Recovery, a licensed and bonded collection agency in Cleveland, Tennessee, 400-5376.
We're here at the Trane Heating and Air Conditioning Testing Facility to see how unstoppable their products really are.
Inside this climate chamber, it's raining incredibly hard on this Trane AC unit. Clearly, it's hard to stop the train.
Ready for a heating and air unit that's been tested in the harshest environments possible? Stop thinking about the other guys and get a Trane. Call Mechanical Systems today to get your home on the road to comfort. 336-5739.
Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Economy Rental, located at 901 Sahara Drive Northwest. Economy Rental. Rent a living room suite as low as $11.95 a week, $47.95 a month. Bedroom suite from $11.95 a week, $47.95 a month. Economy Rentals. Room packages at group prices. Come by, tell us what you're looking for, and get a group price. 15,000 BTU air conditioners for only $19.95 a week or $79.95 a month. 110 volts, cool 700 square feet with remote control. Economy Rentals. Troy-built riding lawnmowers. 17.5 horsepower, 42-inch cut, $34.95 a week or $138.95 a month. Economy Rental. Bowen 21-inch push mower, $13.95 a week or $55.95 a month. Locally owned and operated for more than 35 years. Located at 901 Sahara Drive Northwest. Economy Rentals.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back, and I'm going to try to have some civil conversation here.
Oh, that's no fun.
Well, Franklin, I'll ask you the first question.
We have to bring in a guest in order to have that.
I'll ask you the first question here. What's the future of the Democratic Party?
I think the Democratic Party's future is up in the air right now. I think both parties, in fact, future is up in the air. I don't think either one of them has done a particularly good job over the last 20 years. I think that they're in the process of destroying themselves in many cases.
Well, the Democratic Party, who's going to be the leader of the Democratic Party going forward?
I don't know that yet. I don't know.
What will they try to sell?
Socialism.
Well, you got two different wings of the Democratic Party.
Liberals.
I hope. Well, look.
Some of the primaries yesterday actually came out worse for Republicans and better for Democrats. They were able to push off the socialist wing of the party and elect some centrists.
Whether John likes to admit it or not, there is a fairly centrist wing of the Democratic Party.
I just gave you a
I understand, but so, my hope is, because I have a different view than some Democrats do, I think that the key to lifting people out of poverty is by growing the middle class, because how do
you grow the middle class?
But Franklin, your party.
I want to ask this question: how do you grow the middle class?
Well, I think that you have to do some investment in infrastructure in a serious way, because those are middle class jobs. Number one, so that's part of it.
What do you mean?
Number two,
what does the word investment mean?
Well, you'll have to spend money to build
Who
bridges
spends
and roads.
money?
All of us, John. All of us. Secondarily,
The government or
I'm
private
trying to
sector?
answer his question.
All right, go ahead.
Secondarily, I think we do need to look at this prison reform issue. I think it's a serious question. We are spending huge amounts of money to incarcerate people. I don't know that that's the wisest investment.
Should we send them back to Mexico?
Well, I'm talking about Americans, my friend, and the vast majority of people in our prisons are Americans, by overwhelming numbers.
Okay.
All right? So I think we ought to be looking at what we are spending our money on in terms of education. That's important.
Now, wait a
I
minute.
think
we spend more money on education.
I didn't say we were wisely. I didn't say we were wisely spending it in every case.
Then we don't need to spend more. We need to be better about how we spend it.
Well,
our education, I think
there's some areas where we do need to spend more money.
I think our education is what the
then
problem
it ought to
is.
come from areas that we're spending too much.
Possibly, Don, but I don't know if that's
yeah, but
all
you
we
can't do that with the teachers union in bed with you all, because you all depend on their votes too much. And if you ever went in and said, hey, we're wasting money here and here, let's move it over there, they'll pitch a hissy fit. They won't support your Democrat candidate, so your people won't do that.
Well, anyway, but what are we going to do? Keep going with what you think we ought to do to clean this up. Let me ask you this. Let me give you a question. The unemployment is off the wall right now. I mean, there's just, we need people to work.
Sure.
So if we put job requirements around getting food stamps, would that be a good move right now or a bad move?
Well, first of all, you have to have jobs that people are qualified to perform, number one.
Okay.
All right. That's the difficulty we're having at this point. It is true that there are more job openings, but the reason for that, in part, is because we don't have people with the skills to fill them. There are people who would take jobs, but they don't have the skills to actually perform them. Many employers around the country are reporting that they can't find people who have those skills. So is that a failing of our education system? It might very well be. I think John would probably agree with this part. Our technical education portion of our public education system has gotten a little off track. In many cases, we haven't modernized it to meet the kinds of jobs that we're actually going to need out there.
In other words, robotics, things like this.
Things like that, that you have to have some ability to do. The basic technical education that we did 30 or 40 years ago and have been doing since then may not be a match with the economy that we have right now. So those are all things that I would think a lot of Republicans would agree on. When you're talking about education, here's something that's going to be popular with some teacher groups, but not with others. I think we should pay teachers more, personally. Now, I don't have a problem with upping the qualification requirements to get that money so that we have better and better qualified people there.
When you say upping the qualifications, is that a master's degree or a doctorate degree?
Sometimes it is, but I think this. I've never, and this will offend some of my teacher friends, I don't think anybody with an education degree can teach history. I don't think anybody with an education degree, if you hand them the textbook, can go teach science.
The problem.
Okay, I think you actually need some emphasis in your education in those areas. That's not a requirement in a lot of cases. So, yeah, there are things that we need to do differently.
The problem with that, though, is, Franklin, your party depends so heavily on the teachers' union, not teachers, teachers' union, that the first time you start talking about not really needing a teaching certificate, and I'll be honest with you, I agree with Franklin completely. Now, I have a doctorate degree. I've had a lot of biology, a lot of chemistry in order to be a dentist. I can go to Cleveland State Community College and I can teach biology at Cleveland State, but I can't teach it at Cleveland High School. That has nothing to do with being able to teach. That has to do with the teachers union. And quite frankly, Franklin, your party, unless they're really willing to buck the teachers union, probably can't champion that kind of reform. I'll give you another example on a local level. We did it here locally at Bradley High School. When we were talking about renovating Bradley High School, they were talking about the computer lab. And they were asking for all kinds of money, millions of dollars, to hardwire the computer lab. We already knew at the time that wireless was where everything was at. And wireless was already available. But because we had locked in and said, we need $4 million to hardwire the computer lab, the local education establishment, not the teachers, said, nope, this is what we need. We had local commissioners that were saying maybe we should look at tablets and wireless. Now, a few years later, they went to tablets and wireless and bragged about it, but we wasted all kinds of money hardwiring it because it was the establishment. It's so hard to break free of what, if you go out and ask teachers, for example, I'll give you a perfect example again. They actually asked the teachers when they were getting ready to combine Blythe Avenue School and Bauer School and build the new Blythe Avenue. They said, what do you want? All of the kindergarten and the first grade teachers said, we need the kindergarten and first grade at the front of the building because these are little kids. They can't walk far. They need to be at the front of the building. Do you know where they put kindergarten? It's at the very back of the building, as far back in the building as you could put it. So if you went out and asked teachers what you need, the teachers can tell you what they need. But the problem is the teachers don't get to make the decisions. It's the bureaucrats and the teachers' unions that make these decisions. Now, my party is not in bed with the bureaucrats and the teachers' unions. So we can put some of these things forward. The Democrat Party, unless they can break the stranglehold that the unions have over them, will never champion these kind of reforms.
I think Bradley's doing a great thing with this tech school they're doing with American Uniform.
It might turn out to be that way. We don't know.
But here's another perfect example. Why will the city not go in with them and do it as a joint project?
That's what I was getting
to the county. I've said this before. The county has made that offer publicly. They have offered to cooperate. The county has done their part.
There's a lot of businesses and corporations that would get more involved if all the schools were involved in this.
Well, think about it. Volkswagen and Wacker have essentially set up their own training programs with different community colleges here because they couldn't get workers who had the skills they needed.
That's right.
All right. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
If there's a city school board member out there listening, please phone in and tell us why you all can't cooperate in a joint venture with the county on this kind of big project.
614.
We don't need two of these things in a city the size of Cleveland.
I'm going to guess what the answer is.
Because nobody can agree on who's in charge.
Well, that might be part of it, but also I'm going to guess that it raises a question about how the people who work there are being paid and under what benefit structure they're paid.
So in other words, the top priority is not the kids and getting the project rolling. The top priority is bureaucratic BS.
Well, to their credit, John, because believe me, if anybody were going to point out if the money wasn't being well spent, it would be you. All right? So if they're focused on what the money cost is, I don't know how you would be critical of that.
Well, here's how I'm critical of that. When we had the school for the, what do they call them, alternative schools, I asked the principal of the county alternative school. The city at the time was buying the old YMCA. They were spending $3.5 million on that. The county already had a school.
Named it after the last superintendent.
County already had a school going, and at that time, he told me their average attendance was 9 children a month. Now, I think the attendance is up since then. But I asked him, I said, why can you all not have one alternative school that both systems utilize to save money and we don't have duplication? He said, I won't agree to this in public if you ever quote me, but the reason is because no one can agree on who's in charge. So the city's spending $3.5 million renovating the YMCA because they can't figure out a way to get along with the county.
I thought they were shutting that program down.
Well, that was years ago when they first started it. That's
but now they're
point.
shutting it down.
I don't know.
Think
hard to tell.
They closed that place.
I think you're right.
So,
but the point is, things like that are highly specific and that have a much limited number of kids that would be involved, there's no reason why the two systems can't cooperate and save capital outlay money.
I think it would be a bigger draw if they had a combined technical
if you could show cooperation, sure. Think about that. You're asking a company to cooperate with you, but you're demonstrating that two school systems, both of which are sworn to have the kids' interest as their highest priority, the two systems can't agree to cooperate.
All right, let's get off on another subject. 110 Confederate monuments removed since 2015. What are we doing in our country removing all these monuments? Why?
We're going to lose the lessons of history at the altar of political correctness.
But why has this become a political correct thing?
Because most of the big cities are run by liberal Democrat mayors, and they need the votes of the left-wing wing of the Democrat Party.
Or maybe those areas have much larger minority populations who don't like paying money to honor people they see as pro-slavery. It's understandable.
Well, ask Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin's one of the few remaining moderate Democrats. Ask him what his opinion
I would
is.
encourage you to read, at least to understand the perspective, the book by the New Orleans mayor down there on this issue, who confronted it.
That would
They had 3 major Confederate memorials in New Orleans.
Right.
One of them was for Robert E. Lee, who, as far as any historian could tell, had perhaps spent one day in New Orleans in his entire life, years and years and years and years after the Civil War.
Well, wait a minute. Who put it up? Who put that monument up? And why did they put it up? See, that's what we're
The second monument was one dedicated to the so-called lost cause that was put up there in the 1920s to celebrate a lynching that took place in New Orleans. And the third one was one of Longstreet, who did in fact have.
Here's my problem.
Do you think
so? My question is this:
the lynching in New Orleans, if that was there, and I walked by and I read that, what would I think? If I read about that monument,
well,
that there was a lynching there.
Guess what, though? They didn't have that. They didn't have any information
Yeah, but
about
there
that.
are cities that have actually, and now, Franklin, you and I have talked about this. There are cities that chose not to remove them, but to add context to them. But here's my problem with
and
that.
that's what I actually suggested.
But Franklin, here's my problem with that. New Orleans is a Democratic city, and they've got a mayor down there that is grandstanding. So here's my overarching kind of view of this.
It wasn't politically
Hang on a minute.
popular.
So here's a mayor who is kowtowing to a minority group down there demanding that they remove this. But that's the same city that when those people were actually at risk of life of drowning in a flood, left 1,000 school buses parked in a parking lot instead of actually using them to evacuate those very people.
He
So
wasn't
I
the
look
mayor
at this
then,
and
though,
go,
was he?
I know, but it was the
And
Democrat.
that mayor actually got prosecuted.
It was
and put
the
in prison.
Democrat kind of control, the Democrat establishment. I look at that and I go, so you allowed those people to drown rather than use the school buses, but you'll grandstand on this and go, I'm there for you.
Well, actually, that was very politically unpopular for that mayor.
What about the cake bake? The cake baker.
What about it?
The case just came down with they refused to bake the cake for the gay wedding.
Well, the Supreme Court, in some ways, muddied the water. I mean, they certainly did support that
They
particular.
didn't muddy the water
they
any,
did.
but it is an extremely limited decision.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, that doesn't muddy it.
Because it specifically held the door open for other challenges without being really clear how they would come down on
Let me ask you something. If I had if I made kitchen cabinets for a living,
Mhm.
okay, and you came in and wanted me to make some kitchen cabinets, and I was really busy, and I just told you I didn't have time right now,
Yeah.
what would happen? Would you sue me?
No.
Okay. What's the difference in the cake
Well,
maker?
here's the problem. The ruling
Well, that's
actually...
not what the Supreme Court.
There's
In fact, they strongly suggested that would be unconstitutional for you to do that. If you just said I'm not going to do business with gay people, for example.
No, I'm busy.
Well, that's not a problem with that, though.
Well,
this cake baker didn't say I'm too busy to do the job right now. That's not what he said.
What he said was, I will bake you any cookies you want. I will bake you any cakes you want. I will sell you
But I
anything
don't
you
believe in
want. But I
cake.
don't want to do the decoration of a wedding cake for
I
you.
understand.
Now, here's the real problem, though. The slapdown is not so much about this. It is interesting that Kennedy, the justice that gave us gay marriage, did the majority of this slapdown. Now, Justice Thomas actually expanded it a good bit more and said, you know, how do we, as a court, allow Westboro Baptist Church to hold Ku Klux Klan flags up, but we say that decorating a cake is not expression? How do we tell a woman that nude dancing is a protected expression, but decorating a cake is not?
But interestingly enough, then in that opinion, they declined to make the ruling on the basis of these free speech
That's true.
issues.
That was Justice
That's the problem.
Thomas's concurring. But
All they did was say that in this particular case, the Colorado Civil Rights Commission had expressed open hostility toward the man's religious views, which were honestly
But that's
held.
actually the most important part
and
of that.
For that reason, they showed such bias that he didn't get a fair hearing.
what happened was they had 3 cases come before them where a gay supporting bakery refused to make a cake that had Bible verses condemning homosexuality on it. And they allowed that. And that was actually the crux of what he said. He said, basically, you people are the bigots. This man wasn't a bigot because he didn't refuse to serve gays. He refused to make a wedding cake. He also doesn't make Halloween cakes. So he has religious beliefs. But the ruling actually slapped the crap out of the Colorado Civil Rights Commission.
And I think that's an honest statement. That's accurate, what he just said.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
I want to ask your guys' opinion on something. I don't want to change the subject, but we have a local fast food place here in Cleveland, and it says when you walk in there, it says your limit time to eat is 30 minutes. What do you guys think about that?
With everything that's came out lately, they got a lot of nerve, though, like I say. Where is this place? I want to know.
It's actually a McDonald's up on 25th Street.
Well, I mean, I'm always torn on all these things. I mean, these people run businesses, and if you've got someone, you actually set up a dining room with X number of chairs, and you figure out how many times that chair needs to turn over.
The code only allows you so many chairs.
Well, right, but you figure out how many times that chair needs to turn over per day to make a profit.
Right.
If someone comes in, sits down, orders 1 cup of coffee, and sits there for 5 hours, they occupy that space, and it's not producing anything. I think you have a right to control your business.
Well, you do, guys, but, I've been hearing people talking about Starbucks all this time.
Right.
And Starbucks had a right to get rid of those guys, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I don't think there was any racial bias there. I think the manager made a huge mistake because, unfortunately, you can't go out there and say, look, you're taking up space, you're not buying anything, you need to leave. If they happen to be a minority, you're going to get accused of racism.
Well, guys, I appreciate you, and I'll be listening.
All right, thanks.
He's right. I agree. I don't think that manager had any intent to be racist. I think, and from what I understand, to be honest, Starbucks has been kind of crappy to her because apparently they had a corporate policy that said if you're not buying something, you need to be moving on. And she was actually enforcing corporate policy, and then they just pulled the rug out from under her.
Yeah. Starbucks has had a lot of weird things happen lately.
Well, I hope they get their fill of the Seattle City Council paying their millions and millions of new taxes. I hope they enjoy liberal philosophy.
All right. What about no more Miss America contest the way it used to be? No more bathing suits. No more. What was it? Somebody said they might as well just have the Miss America contest on a radio show. You think we ought to just put it here?
Well, they said that's not going to be based on looks at all.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, our local pageants and so forth have moved away from those types of beauty-emphasized things years and years ago.
The Junior Miss was never a beauty pageant. The Junior Miss was always a scholarship program. So there have been programs that didn't emphasize that. But here's my problem with that. We are going to a society that doesn't want to reward hard work. Now, there's a genetic lottery. I'm not arguing that some people are prettier than other people. But, for example, the swimsuit part. There's a component of that is genetics, but there's also a huge component of that the girl that's running 5 miles a day, the girl that's working out 2 hours, in the morning to get in shape, she put a lot of effort and energy into that. And the idea that we can't validate that, I think, is insulting. I think that's insulting to the concept of hard work.
Well, the Miss America organization is a private organization, and they can do whatever they choose to do.
Now, look, they've had a cyclone of stupid stuff that happened, and I don't begrudge Gretchen Carlson at all. She had experiences that happened to her that are probably her and a lot of other women shaping some of this. The CEO was a moron, got caught with saying some really horrible things about the girls, had to resign. But I don't think this is the answer.
Did you happen to watch the Bill Clinton meltdown this week?
The meltdown?
That's what the liberal press
I think what you
calling it.
saw. I think what you saw, if we're having an honest discussion, is going back to this very topic we were talking about. Is you have a real generational divide about how you look at these things, and with our current lens, people are saying, this was a man in power who had this intern there, and by definition, that's harassment and discrimination. There were a lot of people at that time who were saying, well, it appeared to be consensual, even though it was immoral, and that's not harassment. I think that's a generational thing. I think most young people would come down against Bill Clinton in this area. It's older people who, by and large, who would tend to defend him.
I think you're glossing over the fact that what you're actually seeing is a man of privilege who simply refuses to accept that he's wrong. He is a man who thinks he's entitled to that. And he's married to a woman who thinks she's entitled to that. Okay. They're entitled to whatever they want.
When did he melted down when he was asked if he wanted to apologize?
No, if he had apologized.
Well, I didn't see the meltdown part. I saw him say.
He got angry.
I saw him say that he had apologized nationwide on television.
But the guy, that's not.
But
the
that
question.
wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question.
I understand.
The question was, have you apologized
Bill
to?
Clinton. I'm simply saying I think that's what you're saying.
Keep in mind, Franklin brings up the consensual part. There are 3 women who say that he physically raped them and assaulted them.
Which he did.
And that's never been but the problem is that's never been investigated. Their story has never been allowed to come out because a compliant media covered for the Clintons.
Okay. Well, I think
and a Democratic Party covered for the Clintons. I think
that's the issue that you're seeing generationally, though, whether that would be the case today.
Do you think the Clintons are finally taking a step backwards?
They're not taking a step back. The Democrat Party would love for them to take a step back, but they're egotistical maniacs, and they think they're due this.
Okay.
Franklin didn't want to answer that one, but how do you think Clinton's doing right now, the Clinton family?
The Clinton family?
Money-wise, they're doing great.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of dollars.
And politics. They've always been involved in politics.
Well, that has been Bill Clinton's passion since he was in high school. I mean,
no, he's had an overriding passion, but yeah, politics was second.
All right, let's talk about the Inspector General's report. Are we going to get to see it?
Yes.
When?
Probably in about 2 weeks.
When it's finished, I assume.
It's going to be a blistering report. You know how you can tell?
Democrats.
The Washington Post and the media are already spinning it down.
What about McCabe wanting immunity right now?
Well, I don't understand. If you've done nothing wrong, and as according to Comey, McCabe was an outstanding, upright, member of the FBI, why would you need immunity?
Why do you think he wants immunity, Franklin?
You think he lied and he didn't have permission to release
I don't know, but you know what I've said all along? If somebody did lie, feel free to prosecute them. I'm for that. I mean, the president threw his son under the bus this week, so for this very question. So tell me about that.
I don't know what you're talking about. The president threw his son under the bus, but let me say this:
His son testified to Congress that his father wasn't involved in drafting that statement to the press about what happened in the Russian Tower meeting with the
What's
Russians.
the definition of it?
It's not it. It said wasn't involved, is what he said. Didn't dictate it. Sent his press secretary out to say, did not dictate it.
It depends on what the definition of it
And
is.
now the answer is, from the president's own lawyers, he did dictate it. It was all his work.
No, I think
that is what they said.
I think they said he added a few
Brent
words.
Humes, of all people, on Fox News last night, said the White House is lying.
I think he said he did help some with it.
No.
Let me ask you.
That's not what he said.
Can I ask you this? If you were running for president and you were running against John Stanberry, okay, and somebody called you up and said, listen, I got a bunch of good stuff on John. I want to come by and talk to you about it. What would you say?
Well, it depends on whether they were an agent of a foreign government or not.
No. What
But
would you
here's
say?
the problem, Franklin. And this is the problem for y'all, and you're going to rant and rave. But I'm not trying to be unfair here. Hillary Clinton did exactly the same thing. We actually know that they actually paid people who were getting information from a foreign government. And you all don't seem to care at all about that. We've already got that proof. The Steele dossier was paid for by Hillary and the DNC, and they were actually cooperating with Russian intelligence officials to put it together.
They paid an agent of a friendly country.
Who was working with, actually, it doesn't matter friendly or not, foreign was the word. That's the word y'all are using, foreign. I'm not trying, I'm telling you, I'm not that bothered by that either. Here's the real kicker for you. I understand how campaigns work. I understand what they were doing. I'm not that upset at Hillary and the DNC for doing it. But the point is, you all lay out an entire rationale for what collusion is, and we check off every point of it with the Hillary Clinton campaign, and you all don't care about that.
I have said nothing, John, except that the matter should be looked into, and the investigation should go to its natural conclusion, whatever that's going to be.
When do you think it might
And
happen?
if the president's cleared by that, I think that would be a good thing.
But we can't figure out whether the people doing this are sincere or not.
Why not,
Because we have text of people going, we're going to screw him any way we can, who are supposed to be the objective people.
You don't have text saying that, John.
You have people going, we've got an insurance policy. We've got people going, he's horrible. We've got to stop him.
And the people making the decisions
that was
are all Republicans.
That guy, the guy making some of those statements was
How would
an
these
assistant
Republicans be out
director
to
of
get
the
him?
FBI.
Why would the Attorney General, Trump's Attorney General, sit there with handcuffs on and not do a darn thing?
Because he thought he had a conflict of interest.
I think
That's what he said.
I don't know about that. Why did the Democrats lead him into believing he had a conflict of interest for saying hello to somebody?
Look, I'll defend him a little bit. He's looking at the press. He's looking at how this is going to look. And you're right. The Democrats did an excellent job of boxing him in.
Of setting him up.
Well,
By the way, the Navy's...
I want to congratulate everybody in this room.
Thank you.
We are the only people, I think perhaps in the entire nation, who have not been savaged by Donald Trump on Twitter this week.
By the way, the Navy sailor who was convicted of treason for having the picture inside the sub is now suing Obama and the Justice Department because they didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton for the same thing.
The legal affairs analyst for Fox News pointed out last night, that case is going nowhere.
All right, I'm going to give you a Hickson prediction. We got to go. You've heard all this crap going on about Obama and all this stuff. I think it's going to come back to Obama's Attorney General. There's nothing been said about him.
There's actually new texts that just came out that are showing them discussing the Obama administration being involved in this.
Well, I think, they're
Just came
finding
out
it
today.
is, but you know what? I think the Attorney General Obama had was the biggest crook in the United States or maybe even the world. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve